I am painting, but I'll also be talking about the history of paints and how to use acrylic paint. So here's the pot so far. I'm not finished. I'm just waiting for this layer to dry, and then I'll touch it up. And then I'm going to add a little bit of black into the little crevices, the lines in between my ridges, and I'll show you that. I love that technique. I use it for like almost everything.
So the paint doesn't affect how it dries?
Well, you are adding more moisture when you paint it, but this paint, which is acrylic, it does dry really quickly, like within minutes. So the answer is it doesn't hurt anything, and it's completely optional. I'm just trying to make it look like this thing is made out of like terracotta clay, and I'm trying to copy the other vase a little bit more closely by putting the color, a similar color down. Add paint, add color, but just be very careful with it, because you don't want it to look like rainbow unicorn. You know, your stuff doesn't look like something from a daycare project. You know?
There was this girl, it was this show I used to watch. It was like a makeup competition.
Mm-hmm.
And she would literally like use so many colors, and everything she did looked like a rainbow. And they would try to tell her to dial back because it looked good. It was just really out here. So yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. When you put the paint on, don't go back over that area, again and again too much. Your brush will start to remove and it'll peel off. For some reason, the material does that. So you scrub it too much, and that acrylic paint is going to come off. So acrylic paint is made out of latex, and I said I was going to talk to you about paint and a little bit of history about paint. Paint was used 40,000 years ago in the Stone Age. There are depictions of people in caves, animals that they hunted, and we know that they, hunted certain animals, and we know a little bit of information about these people, these prehistoric people, because of art. Art was the first language. It's a visual language, so it doesn't matter if it's 40,000 years later. We try to understand what was important to that person. But they had developed paint, and it was made out of natural materials. So I'm going to ask you guys a question. What is it that they could have used to paint on the walls? There's a place in Altamira, Spain. There's a place called Lascaux in France, where prehistoric people painted paintings on walls about their life and their daily lives and what they cared about. What could they have painted that with? Any thoughts? Food? Yes, it could be fruit juices or skins, because sometimes the skins have a pigment when you crush them, right? So they could be berries. They could be some sort of fruit, like berries are fruit, yes. How about anything else? Soil, yes. Soil meaning mineral, right? Yes, rocks. You know how some rocks are more, they might have like a chalky yellowish color. So they're not quite, you might call them clay, like a hard piece of clay. If you grind that up against another rough rock, then you're going to have yellow ochre or red, some sort of red terracotta clay can be used, and then you just mix it with water, just like Tajay said, and then you can make it a consistency that you can take your hand, dip it in there, stick it on the cave wall, or you could get a bone, and this is actually the very first instance of airbrushing, this primitive airbrushing right here. The person took a bone, which was hollow, and it was like a straw, so they sucked the mud or the red clay water into the straw a little bit, and then they put their hands on the cave wall, and then they like blew into the straw, and that was the first primitive instance of like spray painting or airbrushing. So they even did that, and that's a very famous instance of painting. In the past, some of the paints were made out of extremely expensive things, so people couldn't afford it. There were plenty of instances where artists went broke because they, used all their money from their commissions to just buy more of the art supplies to make their art so that they could be employed. So this color right here, which is a very popular color called ultramarine blue, and ultramarine literally means beyond the sea. That's how beautiful, they thought this blue was. It came from a stone called lapis lazuli from the country of Afghanistan. Wafa and Ghazala are, if you don't mind me sharing, if you're there, are from the country of Afghanistan. So lapis lazuli is a semi-precious gemstone. It's used in jewelry, beaded necklaces, earrings, and it's really expensive, but they would grind up this gemstone to make this paint called ultramarine blue, and that's a very beautiful, pure looking blue. Berries or fruit, minerals or rocks, yes. And the third thing is animal products, animal byproducts. Bone, you crush bone, blood, oil, or some sort of fluid. I know that sounds kind of gross. Some sort of fluid from an insect or animal. So it was only a couple years ago that Starbucks, and I'm mentioning Starbucks because of this thing that has to do with pigment coming from an animal. Have you ever had one of those frozen drinks where they grind up the fruit juice, pulpy fruit juice on the ice? Well, those smoothies were this beautiful shade of like pink red, and somehow word got out that was from bug pigment. They're called conchial beetles. They come from South America. They live they're normally found inside of cactuses and things. Well, they're a common pigment used in food product, but people don't need to know that. But somehow people somebody shared that information, so people got really upset. And they had a point, also if they were vegetarian, they don't want to eat animals. So people were extremely upset. But the thing is, there's a lot of things that you may eat that you don't know the ingredients of. Modern people are a little bit more picky about what they put in their bodies or on their bodies. But back then, you're just trying to survive. Okay? Later on, when there was actual serious art taking place, like where a person was called an artist, Michelangelo, Leonardo, they started to, they used paint that was mixed with egg, the yellow yolk part of an egg, and used that as their vehicle. So if you look at this container of paint, I brought this totally unusable paint here to show you, because you can see how the vehicle and the pigment has separated. So this is the powdered pigment that was mixed with this liquid. Now this liquid is some sort of emulsion, like some sort of plastic emulsion thing. This is called the vehicle. and the pigment is the coloring agent. So know that the coloring agent part, which actually gives the color, is the pigment, and that's usually a powder. This liquid part, it could be a liquid, it could be a gel, it could be some other consistency, but usually something semi-liquid or liquid. This is the vehicle that the pigment basically, flows inside of. So this is old, so it has separated, and sometimes with acrylic paint, it kind of goes to the bottom and turns into a solid block. And after a while, you can't even mix it back into the vehicle, and then you have to throw it away. So everything has its limited shelf life. People started to mix the pigment with oils, linseed oil, plant seed oils basically, and they found that it created a beautiful paint that was shiny when it dried, and also you could do like lots of different effects to give your painting more depth. So Jan van Eyck was supposed to be the painter who invented oil paint, but there's been some evidence that there was oil painting going on before him. So he's a Northern Renaissance painter. But that was the third innovation, just from using water or pig fat or whatever the ancient people used. We don't know. The second one was egg yolk to make tempera paint, which is a non-shiny paint. Third invention is oil paint, which is very beautiful and glossy and shiny. If you've ever seen an oil painting, it's normally, and if it's a smooth oil painting, not a textured one, it's normally very, very shiny, just because of how oil dries and looks. It has a shine or a sheen. The next thing is, okay, I think I have some time here. Oh goodness, I don't have a lot of time. In the 1970s, 60s, and late 60s and 70s, there was a revolution in paint, industrial paint. People started to slowly, over, hundreds of years, make their own colors that were not directly from nature. They might take something from nature but mix it together. It could be metals, it could be mercury. Some of this stuff could kill you. It was not good or healthy stuff. Lead. There was a white paint could be produced by putting strips of lead metal into a jar, and then by putting horse manure on top, you could create a white paint. I don't know how they came up with that idea, but you know what lead paint does to a human being's nervous system, right? It totally messes them up. So, some of our houses might still have that old lead paint in there if our houses were built before 1960. And they use that type of paint. It gives a beautiful white finish. So now there's artificial paints. The invention of plastics created acrylic paint. And acrylic paint allowed us to have something that was washable. You could wash your brushes out. It allowed us to print stuff on our t-shirts and make signs and advertisements that didn't wash away if you let the paint dry. So I used acrylic paint on this pot, and I used a bristle hair brush, okay? And this one is stiff so that it could move the acrylic paint, which is a very... I know, if you ever gone to Hershey Park and you went on the chocolate factory store, it has the viscosity of really thick chocolate sauce or melted chocolate. That's exactly what it is. It has the viscosity, the thickness of melted chocolate. So you didn't have to use some nasty turpentine, mineral spirits, some sort of gasoline smelling type of liquid to clean off your brushes. You could just use soap and water. The downside is with the acrylic paint, if you get it on your clothes, it's not going to come off because your clothes are literally printed with acrylic paint. It's not meant to come off. So if you decide to use the acrylic, students, make sure you wash it off right away. Put it under the water, put some soap on it, scrub, scrub, scrub. It'll come out, but if you wait a little too long, it may not come out. Okay, if you put it in the dryer, then it'll never come out, because acrylic paint will set up with heat permanently. That's why you iron after you print something. So with the introduction of all this artificial man-made stuff, paints also became a lot more available for everybody to use, so more people could engage in producing art and use beautiful colors. So that's what I have to say about that. Make sure you know what paint brushes to use with what, certain brushes go with certain paints. So if I'm using something thick like this, then I need a brush that has more coarse hairs that can push this thick paint around. So I would use the bristle hair brushes for acrylics and oil paints, because that will push all of that thick viscous paint around. This brush is made out of basically pig's hair. And pig's hair that comes from the back of the pig, where the hair is a little bit longer. So it's a byproduct of the meat industry, and that doesn't go to waste. It's made into brushes. So they call this a boar's head bristle hair brush, or boar's hair brush. But it's not a boar, it's actually a pig that it comes from. If you don't want to use something from an animal, there's plenty of brushes now that are made out of polyester. So this thing is it's a stiff enough brush you could use acrylic paint with it, and it's made out of, acrylic. It's made out of plastic, the hairs. If you're using dyes or something watery, really watery, then you need to use a softer brush with finer hair. Get a soft hairbrush, okay? The softer the hairbrush is for the more liquidy paints. All right, have a nice weekend. Stay safe and be careful out there. Plenty of men who are like makeup artist celebrities out there, right?
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, and how do I know this? Because you girls shared that with me. You know their names, you know their life stories. If I see a guy with full-on makeup with like beautiful, glossy, hot pink lips or something, I don't know. I still am not used to that.
Yeah, I feel like people just have to be like a little more open-minded to the concept that men do for makeup, and it can be colorful. Like, doesn't matter.
I mean, all the K-pop guys, they all wear so much makeup. And then when I think about my husband, who is, Mr. Han, who does not have their body physiques, and if he wore makeup, I think I would die, because he would look so silly.